Hello, hello, and welcome everyone to the final session of Dare to Be Great 2024. And we have 1,011 people with us from around the world. Amazing, amazing, amazing. And we've been doing stuff all week this week. I haven't had much sleep, but it has been completely worth it. And just a shout out to those who are watching. We've got, of course, those in the United States. We've got folks out of Canada. From what I saw last time, there were folks in the UK, Lithuania, Iceland, Russia, Germany, as well as Australia and Qatar. So still even more people that they continue to come on and just viewing all of this amazing content throughout this whole week. So thank you for all the support, everything going on this entire week. It's just been a really, really good time. And then today, I wanted to make sure that we went out with a bang. Really, that this epic last day, it was all panel discussions that we've been doing, and this discussion, I will say right now, just a warning that if anything that we are talking about here today or during this time is a trigger at all, and you need to leave, please do so. It's okay. Also, if there are any questions that you have, please make sure to use the QA section. It's right on the right side. It has a question mark on it. Just click on that, type in your question, hit enter. I will see it there, and we will be answering them throughout the time that we are doing all of this. This is all the classes and discussions have been very important, right? This one is kind of strikes hard and deep for myself. It's called No Dispatcher Left Behind, and I've got an excellent panel of guests with me today. And I'm going to go ahead and start with Roxy. We're going to do our just our background experience and such, and we'll continue down the line. Go ahead, Rox.
Okay. Well, I will say I agree with Ricardo. This topic is a really personal one for me, and kind of spawns from a lot of conversations that Ricardo and I have had over the past several months. So I'm really excited to see where this goes. I'm Roxy Van Gundy. I've introduced myself the last 3 or 4 panels. So,
Yeah.
hey, it's me again. I have been a dispatcher for 19 years. I currently direct a center in Northeast Kansas. I'm pretty active in NENA. I was the co-chair of NENA Wellness. I then moved into being the second vice president for the NENA Executive Board, which is a huge honor. And it has really been eye-opening and such a great experience to get to interact with 911 professionals all over the country. Thank you for believing in me, and thank you for trusting me with some of your stories. I'm going to do everything I can to fix it for you and to be there for you and to try to make a change. So thanks for having me, Ricardo. It's always good.
Thank you. And now we go over to Cinnamon.
My name is Cinnamon Ryhound. I am a first responder trauma clinician based out of Cincinnati, Ohio. I started doing this work back in 2017. And after working collaboratively as the clinical support for a department who had a line of duty death, a fire department, I realized that there was a far greater need for mental health support for first responders than this one critical incident. And so I quit my job. I started whole house practice, whole house counseling as a private practice, catering specifically to first responders. And since then, we've expanded what our definition was to first responders and who we serve. And a few years ago, and Aaron might talk more about this, we started a podcast as a response to only being able to work with the people in the areas that we were licensed. And so we started After the Tones Drop, which has more of an international reach, and it allows us to get that message out without only being able to serve our, whoever we can physically reach. And it's been a really empowering process for us as clinicians and as individuals, because we do get to hear more diversity in story, which ultimately just reminds us that this is a community that, regardless of which badge you're wearing, There are so many similar experiences, and we all need support to be able to navigate this. And I'm just really excited that we're able to be here and that Ricardo asked us to be a part of it. And I look forward to being able to participate.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here as well. And Erin?
Hello, I am Erin Maccabee, and I am also a first responder clinician, but I am in Columbus, Ohio. And I am just looking at these numbers here 1,012 people, and I am in awe of that. And one, Ricardo, how incredible. Thank you for doing this, but also how incredible for all of you, 1,000 people to show up, take time out of your Friday to be here to talk about something so important, because I am very clear that it's going to take all of us to support one another, to heal and change the conversations. And so I acknowledge all of you for being here. But, kind of like Cinnamon, the reason I'm here is because something bigger than me decided this is where I belonged. And it was all based on about 14 years ago, the man I was dating, who was a firefighter, ended up deciding to take his own life. And I didn't know at the time that that was going to be the beginning of my future with first responders and their mental health. Of course, that was a devastating time, but now it's one of those things where it's like, he is saving so many people through that. And that sounds wild, but I watch people every day step into vulnerability, step into a place of willingness as a result of me being able to show up and be here and guide individuals in the best I can. But it is a true honor to work with this population. Never a dull moment, ever, which I don't hate. So, it's really exciting. But yeah, as Cinnamon said, as a result of there just being not enough resources that were at the ready, and more importantly, the education side of it. That was where After the Tones Drop was born, because what we have found is that so many people, as we know, feel like they're all alone. And we wanted to make sure people's stories were being told over and over and over again, one, but also help educate folks on like, what the heck's going on with me? Like something's off. And so we try to pinpoint that, like, okay, well, here's a couple of things that might be happening, because I know for me, the better I can understand something, the more easy it is for me to process. I don't feel like I'm broken or something. So that's been a really cool development for us. But yeah, it is freaking awesome to be here, and I appreciate it.
I'm happy to have all of you here. This is going to be an excellent conversation. And what I want to do first is I want to go ahead and just kind of read the summary of this session for anyone who is joining us right now who may have not had a chance to check it out, and what the title is all about as well, and No Dispatcher Left Behind. And then what we're going to do from there is I'm going to read a couple messages, and we're just going to kind of talk about some of those. But maybe before that message, those messages as well, just kind of explain a little more of where this came from. So that'll be here in this summary as well. And like I said, if you have any questions, use the QA section there, but also anything in the comments, we'll be watching them and we'll be commenting on those as well. So here we go with the summary. So the summary says, it has been said that it takes a special type of person to work as a 911 professional. The mission to serve and the love for this profession quickly gets into your blood. But what happens when the mission ends? For some, we may feel lost. Who am I now? When the voices of haunting calls return, who can we reach out to? We can reach out to our 911 family. However, once we are out, some of us feel as though we can no longer reach out to them. Some of us are left struggling alone. In this session, we will explore what people go through when they leave dispatch and how others have overcome these challenges, ensuring that no dispatcher is left behind. So that there is a big thing, and something that Roxy and I have talked about. There's a lot of folks that have reached out to kind of mention this as well, to say that when I left, I had always thought, like, I put all of these calls, all of these voices, all of this on a shelf, and it's always been tucked away. However, now I'm out and it has all come back. And it's hard, and it's now a struggle because I don't know who I can reach out to. There might be, one or two people that I talk to, but they're also kind of going through some things, and I don't want to put that on them. But everyone else is just kind of cut me off. And I know when I first left dispatch, even though I ended up going into the private side of 911, I was having some kind of issues myself because I kind of thought like, okay, well now I'm not in dispatch, so where do I where do I fit? Like I'm still in 911, but I'm on the private side. Can I still speak to the side of where I was before as an 911 professional? And another friend of mine, excuse me, just last week, I was kind of talking to them about this session, and they were telling me that when they got out of dispatch as well, they kind of felt like this. But what they had to do was they had to learn how to feel again. They had to learn how to feel again for themselves, because they had spent so many years feeling for everyone else that they were now trying to figure out, well, what do I do for me? So before I go into reading some of the stuff, Aaron, are some of these things that either you or Cinnamon have heard during, some of the podcast episodes, or even people that you've spoken to in public safety as first responders?
Absolutely. And I want to say, and I don't want to discount this, on the dispatcher side, but this is the common conversation that we hear from everybody. Who am I without this badge? Right.
Mhm.
Um, and we have talked so much about practicing very, very early at knowing that the job is not the identity, because once it's gone, it feels like you get hit by a 2x4. And so one of the things that stood out in what you just shared, Ricardo, was this idea of I have other people maybe that I can talk to, but also they have their own stuff. And so I don't want to burden them, which is another common thing that we hear often, is this idea of like, why would I take my stuff to them and add on to the things that are already troubling for them? So both of those things really stood out, but this is the common conversation, and something that I think a lot of coaches and clinicians and advocates are practicing more about, encouraging people to have a game plan, because I don't care what job you do, when retirement happens or when the job ends, there is this weird deficit. But when you have a safe place to go, people that understand, what you're going through, and that gets ripped away, it's a whole nother thing added to it. So for sure. Long story short, yes.
What about you, Cinnamon?
Yeah, I think that the theme that we hear a lot is retirement creates space for recollection, right? And when we do these jobs, we are, if not, blood work telling, in fight or flight, we're in a pseudo state of fight or flight. And to change that language to we're just in defense mode, right? Like, so to understand the brain science about what happens to our brains, our bodies, when we have enough time and space from that last shift, we're going to start down regulating, and that's when we're going to get that flood, right? And we haven't down regulated when we're in the middle of our retirement party. And so we're leaving the dispatch center thinking that we're good. And we are. It's when we have that distance and when we start de-escalating and we're in more of that rest and digest state where all of our, bells and whistles in our brain start working as one ideally should when we're not in fight or flight, that things start flooding back. And then it's like, oh, what's wrong with me? There's this problem that I need to solve. And so part of our job that I have seen us fall short on a lot is we don't understand how our bodies work when we do this job. And so we think something's going wrong with us, when in reality, this is just the natural process of getting out of the combat zone, is that you're going to come back down as we would want you to, and being able to appreciate that that was a protective state. So learning how to feel again, like you mentioned, Ricardo, part of the reason that we've been able to stave off those feelings is because we have had those walls up. And in retirement, whether it's because I want to take a different job and, do something different, or I'm at the end of my 25 plus year career, if we don't know how to, how our body works, we don't know how to expect that. So we don't know how to constructively plan for it. And then we think we're broken, we're screwed up, we're, the only one, right? Because whether it's on social media or in phone conversations, we all still live in the social media life where everything's going well. And I get to spend more time with the grandkids. And one thing that we've consistently seen from our guests is not one single person has recovered in isolation. It's their healing has always happened in a part of a community, but it takes them making the effort to say, I don't feel okay. And instead of hiding that, I'm going to go get curious. And then they find that they're not alone. And while they can be the only one that makes the decision, and it is a very independent decision, the recovery process of doing this job, which is going to be necessary for everyone who's done this job, is a collective experience. And if we don't have those environments where the collective work can be done, or you can find each other, then we're in trouble. And we're going to have a lot of people that feel alone.
Fully agree. And we get so caught up in a lot of stuff that is going on, and things are just going and going and going and going, that when you're out and it starts coming back, like you were saying, because you're not really paying attention to you, that's when it hits hard. And even the last year and a half that I was in dispatch, even though I got into meditation, even though I got into yoga, even though I got into breathing techniques, when I was out, it hit hard again, because now I'm at the doctor because all of these different pains that I didn't realize, like apparently I was half-assing my yoga because I was doing like the bare minimum. Because then when it started hitting hard, I'm back at the chiropractor. I'm like, what the hell? I thought I was doing enough, but I definitely wasn't. So, Roxy, for you, what are some of the things that you have heard? Have they been similar? Even those that are kind of, I don't know, maybe scared to transition out?
I love that Cinnamon mentioned about soldiers transitioning out of battle. While what we do is not battle, and I'm not likening what we do to that in any way, shape, or form. I remember working in a military town. That transition was very tough when people came back from deployment. And it's the same thing here. That transition is rough, and nobody really thinks about the fact that, like we talked about in the wellness panel, a lot of us that are transitioning out, we were not given a good foundation of wellness, and we were not talked to about developing our own personality and our own, here's who Roxy is outside of the center, because that was disloyal in some way. If you weren't fully 911, if you weren't all in, if you weren't the job, then you weren't loyal to us. And when you leave, you're definitely not loyal to us. So I think a lot of those folks who are leaving and thinking about leaving, or are getting right up to retirement stage, that's a real fear, because we still have so many people who don't feel like they can go because it's not being loyal to what we do, and don't feel like they can go because they don't know who they are outside of this. Because when you spend way more than half your life doing something, what are you outside of that? And I think that really scares a lot of people deep down. And I've listened to a lot of stories from older dispatchers and dispatchers who are really struggling with their mental health and are thinking about transitioning out. That fear is really deep-seated, that I'm going to fail if I don't have 911. I'm going to fail if I'm not 911. They're all going to hate me because I'm leaving. There's just so many layers to it. And I think that, we're failing those who are getting ready to leave, and we're failing those who have already left, because we're just kind of letting them figure it out. And I have definitely seen that throughout my travels for sure.
So in the comments here, really quick, Carrie says it feels like you were thrown to the side. It's hard.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
what I want to say as well is if you feel comfortable enough, okay, you don't have to do this, but if you feel comfortable enough and you have a thought like Carrie just put in there, or maybe you are in here and you have left recently or something, and you feel comfortable sharing kind of how you felt, please put that in there as well because this is an open discussion. That's why we're doing this. So what I want to do is I want to read this first message and then just kind of get what each one of you like what stands out, what you think. Keely over here says I felt like I was abandoning ship, and I definitely agree. When I was getting ready to leave, when I had this awesome opportunity to switch from being in dispatch to going to be an industry partner on the private side of 911, I felt like I was betraying my people. I felt like I was leaving them behind, like they were going to hate me. And but it was them who actually convinced me that no, you're going to end up doing something that's not only going to help us, but hopefully help out the profession as a whole. And I finally did leave, but man, it was a struggle. I it was it was not the easiest thing to do, and it was scary. So this first message here, this first message that was sent to me in response to just kind of me asking them how they felt when they went out and just kind of their thought process. This first one is kind of a short one, and the second one is going to be a longer one. But either way, same way. I just kind of want to talk about and talk these through. So here's message one. This one comes from a so is dispatcher within the trenches of 911 and worked their way up to being a director and has now transitioned out. Um, so it says in 911, we tend to focus on the dispatchers, rightfully so, ensuring their mental health is cared for, but we tend to oversee those who fight tirelessly for them. We too fight our own demons. It's not easy being caught in the middle, advocating for a group of people who tend to place blame on you for all of the bad things that go wrong and then catch flack for those at the top who either don't support you, and also administrators need help and support too. If you're walking away as an administrator, know that you may carry your own version of PTSD or trauma. Even if you have walked away on your own terms, know that you have been impacted. Find a way to make peace with your decision so that you can truly close the door to the pain while remembering the good times. For those still in it and who, in quotes, live and breathe 911, please find other causes or passions that bring you joy. Don't make it your identity because when you do walk away, you will find it more difficult to truly say goodbye. So, for either one of you who would like to jump in on this, on your thoughts, please do so.
Cinnamon and I are always like looking at you like, who's going to talk first?
I know who's going to go.
We're never short of thought.
Typically, we have been able to communicate via eyes, where we know how to not step on each other's toes. And most of the time, whoever hits the unmute first is going to be the one to say the thing that we're already both thinking. It's kind of handy to share a brain in that way. But the first, Aaron and I have been having this discussion the last few weeks about the if not me who, the use of the word we, like we need to do more. And it's about creating, like when you see a hole in what's out there, we can all sit back and say, man, we need to do something about that. And I always go back to this quote from an author that I really like. Her name's Glennon Doyle. And she says, whenever I think that the world is, not kind enough, not loving enough, not compassionate enough, I take that back and I'm like, I'm not being kind enough. I'm not being loving enough. I'm not being compassionate enough. And it has to start with me. So when we know that there are these holes, like we get to be the ones to fill them. And that means I get to be the one to fill them. And one of the problems that I've discovered in doing this work is you all aren't seen as first responders at a federal or state level oftentimes. So you don't have the things in place organically that first responders do. So it really has to be this grassroots approach to providing some of that. And if I can see that hole and step into it and bring my people with me, I'm keeping notes so I make sure I stay on track. What does that look like? And sometimes that can look like we got to start preparing for the last day on the first day. Right. And Roxy said this at the beginning, like I wasn't given this foundation. Okay. So how do we incorporate that into your training so you aren't a hot mess when you get to the end because we didn't give you the equipment and the knowledge to deal with the middle? And how do we put those alumni groups in place? How do we put the, all of these things in place? And it's when you're in it, you're so busy, right? Like I wrote in the comments, like it really sucks when you have to leave when we're in a mandated overtime crisis because we're in a staffing crisis. Nobody wants to leave their people in the lurch that way. So the idea that we're in the middle of all of this and we're also going to start an alumni group. Yeah. Who's got time for that? But also what Roxy was saying, as far as, who am I without this? When you're in the middle of a mandated overtime crisis because of a staffing crisis, you don't have a lot of hours of the day where you're not Roxy the dispatcher, right? And I don't know what people talk about other than work because that's all I have to talk about. So, it has to be an intentional thing and we have to create it. It's never going to just open up organically for us. So, and I don't think that's exempt to anyone, but leaving this, especially when you're sitting at the tippy top of the org chart, it's a whole different thing because you do tend to look like the bad guy. Because what most people don't always think about is that even sitting at the top of the food chain, there's a whole nother food chain that we don't get access to. So even the people at the top of the food chain aren't always the ones at the actual top of the food chain, and they, get a lot of that heat. And I would never want to be middle management again and have to listen to some bullshit in one meeting and then go explain it to the people that I know are also going to see it, and how do you mitigate that feeling on top of also being the person who's taken calls for years and also doing the quality assurance? I mean, I think that if nothing else, the takeaway is like, of course, this is hard. Of course, you're going to have mental health symptoms. Of course, you're going to have an identity crisis. The of course is so essential to this because otherwise we feel like we're this unique, faulty, like I didn't do it right or something's wrong with me. So that of course piece is really got to be integrated at least until we do better at starting everybody off by saying, hey, this is what's going to happen to your brain and this is what's going to happen to your body. And then 20 years from now, when you choose to retire, it's all going to come smashing back like a train. So instead of having that happen, let's do this stuff in the middle, even though we're all inundated with call after call after call. Like we've got to figure it out.
Yeah, no, I agree. I have told people as well, when I've gone out and trained at different places, I've told them, like, I know a lot of people. It's also happened to me. It's going to happen to you. So what we're talking about here with communications, you might not want to share, and that's okay. That's completely fine. You don't have to. I just want you to know that eventually it's going to come back in a different way, and you might feel as though you can't reach out to anyone. So that's why we're talking about this stuff now. And there have been a few people who are like, "Oh, this bullshit. It's not going to happen to me." And then sometimes that it ends up those folks are the ones who at that time are the ones that are actually hurting the most, and they don't know how to get it out there. Roxy, what were some of the things that kind of stood out to you in that first message?
I relate to it so much because I think that that person is right. You know, people don't realize that there are so many leaders and directors and whatever your title is in that upper that are so tired, and we're being everybody's everything, and we're taking all the brunt of the blame for things we didn't even do, but we're taking that brunt. We're trying to be the peacemaker. We're trying to make all the right decisions. We have to be on every single second of the day. We have to have all the answers. We have to know every single thing about every single thing. And it's exhausting. And I think that that person is so right. We have to shelf all of that other crap that we bring into promoting our traumas from being a dispatcher, our, poor foundational wellness. We have to shelf all of that because now we're in charge of all of these people. And now we're in charge of all of this money. And now we're in charge of all of these things. And I think that that's another piece to this that we're really lacking. We have so many directors who care so deeply and care so deeply about their people that they are burning themselves to the bone, like they're done. And they're quietly walking away. I think that person, it was a surprise when that person probably left, because they were probably everything to everybody, and then they were gone. And people are like, huh, what? She's gone? Yeah, I think that there's more people out there who need support than we know, and it hurts my heart because I'm a big feeler, and Ricardo knows this, but I'm a big feeler. And so when I see on Facebook how people talk so poorly of those who are in leadership, whether they deserve it or they don't, it hurts my heart, because there's so many of us that are trying so hard. And I'm going to win the record for getting upset the most in one Dare to Be Great. But I just think that we're not being considered as having issues too. And, it is lonely regardless of your circle. I have a real big circle, and I can't say that there are more days than not that I feel like I'm the only person in the world. So I really feel for that person, because that hurts my heart that they feel that way. And I understand it so much.
Thank you. I did see that there's a question over for the QA piece. Just know that when we get to the QA portion, we'll go through that. So I see it, just so that you're not thinking, oh, he's not going to get to my question. I will get to your question. I just want you to know that we'll be getting to that part during the QA piece. So Aaron, over to you with that first message. What are some of the things that kind of stood out to you?
The first thing that came to my mind was about a year and a half ago, we had a dispatcher on the show that we had met in a conference, and she was in agony, and she was sobbing and so vulnerable and beautiful and meek and terrified. And she said, she left a message on our hotline for the podcast and said, dispatchers are the forgotten first responder. And the pain in her voice was so profound that it sent shudders through me. The reason that I bring that up is because she had a great director that she was working under, who happened, this person was really, really passionate about getting mental health resources into their center. But nonetheless, when those hats come off or the new hats go on, the expectation in ourselves that we should shift into this like superhuman robot, that needs to be smashed. And I am a firm believer that it is that leadership is by example. And I know that sounds so cliche, but and I know it's easier said than done. But when the leadership in whatever capacity shows up and begins to step into that space of like, it's okay to not be, why it is very reasonable that this would be challenging, and starts leading in that direction, they're already processing in those moments. When it's time to go, they're not burning themselves out, because it becomes team and community and, an opportunity for people to like step into their emotions. Because at the end of the day, we're all humans. We're all doing the best that we can with the tools and information that we have. I think Cinnamon and I probably say that on a daily basis. And that goes for anybody in a leadership role too. And to have expectations that they wouldn't have the same human feelings and emotions and experiences that we do, is unreasonable. And so what if we started playing team, instead of having unrealistic expectations of each other? Because if we're feeling like we're the forgotten ones, then there's a good chance they are too, especially when they're out in this, like, I'm trying to think of what do they call it? What do one of our departments call it when you go into leadership? Oh, she's muted. Anyway, but it's like some ridiculous name, but it's like you cross over to the other side, right?
And going to the dark side, like as in
the dark side. Right. Yeah. And it's like, well, but they weren't on the dark side a second ago, right? They're still the humans that are now taking on everything too, because of so many dynamics, of course. But did I answer your question? I kind of felt like
you
open my mouth.
And no, that was good, because I just wanted to know, what stood out and stuff when you were talking about the dark side. I was going to say the dark side. I thought, well, maybe it's something else, but no, we were right. It was right on. So, I want to read this second message, and this one it's a lot longer. So please bear with me. There's a lot of information in here, and we'll get through this one. So here it is. It says, I left my agency just over a year ago. I loved my job and the people I worked with, but something else came along that allowed me to see my husband and kids more, to work from home. I took a 50% pay cut when I left, but I don't see the money with strictly monetary value. My time became the main thing I considered. My time was worth more than the $40 an hour I was making. The money can always come in, but the time is always going out, and I can't ever get it back. I was giving away my time for a job that would one day abandon me instead of my family, who will be there forever. I don't regret leaving at all. I get to be a part of my family now, which has been a challenge, but a blessing. However, about a month after I left, someone in my new job innocently made a comment about something, and it immediately brought me back to Matthew, one of my last 911 calls. He had just unloaded his 45 into the ceiling of his house while his wife and kids were out shopping because he was suicidal, and knew if he didn't do that, he'd kill himself. I talked to him for 45 minutes before help got there. My new coworkers had no clue what I was thinking about, or that they had brought me back to that call. They would never understand it all. I never talked about that with anyone, and still haven't. A week or so later, something else happened, and I thought about another call where a dad was worried about his son and drove 6 hours to his home to find him lying on the kitchen floor with his throat cut, but he was still alive. I can still hear him saying, "I love you, James," to his son, and it makes me cry every time. I actually worked this call with a coworker's son who dispatched for fire EMS and was on the line in his own dispatch center. I felt like I had a mental filing cabinet of tragedy that I'd previously shoved in the back of a closet and forgotten about that was suddenly ripped open, and everything came flying out of it all over the floor. Honestly, I've just kind of put it all back in the filing cabinet and choose not to open it up anymore. I also really struggled with confidence. I didn't think I could do anything but dispatch. I had no other skills. So it took so much courage for me to commit to leaving and taking my current job. It took me a long time to realize that dispatch actually made me really good at a ton of other things. My current job still requires me to talk on the phone and do data input, just at a way slower and less stressful pace. No one will die if I forget to do something. I am able to actually talk to people and handle escalated callers. And my current job is even more rewarding than anything I ever did before. After being able to look at things objectively, I think it's because I am allowed to be human. I am thanked by my clients and employer for the work I do. I have been told several times that what I have done for my clients has changed their lives. I had to put my dog down and put in a time off request. My boss said my dog is family and just gave me the day off. In dispatch, it would have taken an act of Congress to get a few hours off to put my dog down and then uh, been expected to come in after I was done. Maybe if some of this was allowed in dispatch, people would stay and thrive rather than barely survive. Those first few months after leaving, I noticed serious anxiety issues. I had what I didn't, I had what I didn't realize at the time were panic attacks. This had never happened to me before. I was overcome by emotions and cried a lot in private. I was physically exhausted to the point that I had to nap during my lunch because I couldn't keep my eyes open. I felt like my body and mind were detoxing from being in fight or flight mode for 14 years. I also had to relearn how to be part of my family again and be around people in general. The first few weeks were really nice, and then I realized I had to do life with the people I love, not around them. I used to just go and do whatever I wanted or needed because no one else was around, and I didn't have to really discuss it or plan it with anyone. I worked swing shift or night shift or most of the time in dispatch, so my life was very separated for a long time. All of a sudden, everyone was involved, and that was overwhelming. I had to make a shared calendar with my husband, so we both knew what was going on with each other and didn't make conflicting plans because that was something I really struggled with. A few months after I left dispatch, my husband told me I was a different person and that I used to always be on edge and irritable. That made me emotional for a few reasons. I didn't realize I was so bad before, and it was embarrassing. I was I also was grateful I didn't have to be like that anymore. It's taken a long time, but I have gotten better about things and enjoy being around my family and doing things with them now. I don't ever have to miss another holiday, birthday, or kids' sports game again. I started going to outings for a women veterans group that I'm a part of and actually made friends. I stopped avoiding interaction with other people and viewing the world through pessimistic lenses that we are trained to do as dispatchers. I had to train myself to see the good in the world instead of only the bad. I still don't talk about anything related to dispatch with pretty much anyone at all. My best friend left dispatch many years ago, and we talk about things every now and then, but not often. She's the only person who I feel like it can relate to me. Only a handful of people from my agency talk to me still. Everyone else has never reached out to me to even say hi or comment on a social media post. Nothing. I saw the writing on the wall before I left, so I wasn't surprised or hurt by it. Everyone there is so emotionally and mentally drained. There is no room for anything extra like speaking to someone who is essentially irrelevant in their lives. Excuse me. Simply sending a text message to say hi and see how someone is doing is not a priority. A text message will demand a response and possibly some type of emotional or mental investment from an account that is running in the red for them. I know this because I was one of them. Leaving is the only reason I can see things for what they are now. Although I don't hold anything against the people I worked with, I still it's still really strange to see these people who I spent a majority of my life with for 14 years and literally cut me off within a day, and they may never speak to me again. I still technically work there part time, but no one has reached out to me to cover shifts for months. I hear about how bad things are and how much overtime they are having to work, but still, no one ever asks if I can help out. I suppose because I can't commit to as much as they want me to. I'm not worth it. I blame the culture of public safety for the loneliness and anguish that everyone goes through both while working and after. You are stripped of your humanity while you are working to protect other people's humanity. You can't even care for your coworkers in a way that is truly selfless. You are expected to give your whole life to your job, and literally everything else comes second. If you leave, even retire, the job abandons you, like your spouse who cheated on them. Honestly, I think the only way to fix this is to fix the culture of 911 overall. It's a dog eat dog world where people are trained not to be emotional or become emotionally attached to anything. This is not sustainable. It's okay to care about other human beings, and that might come with your own heartache, but damn, it's worth it. My agency is bleeding people. We had 7 supervisors. There are 3 left, and 1 has been there for less than a year. Everyone has a plan to leave when the straw breaks the camel's back. I truly believe it's because no one cares about each other, because they just can't let themselves. Long message. I know there's a lot to unpack there. And I was actually talking to this person earlier today, while I was reading through all of this and putting it together, and some of these pieces were responses to some of the other questions on, like, how do we combat this? And that last paragraph was what she gave me there. Now I could see through my peripheral a lot of messages coming in over here in the chat as well, and I'll read through those here in a moment. But Aaron, let's start with you. Like I said, there's a lot to unpack here, but what what stands out?
Oh gosh. Yeah, I don't even know where to start because so many things. I think the first thing that I thought was this idea of just being done. Like, I am in sensory overload. That whole idea. And I think about I have this like terrible gift of being able to like see the beauty in the hard things. And the first thing I thought was when there was that comment of like, I am available, I'm available to come work part time and nobody reaches out to me. And I'm like, what a gift. What a gift. Because how easy would it be to sacrifice all of the hard work that this individual put into their life by even putting a toe back in there, right? And it's one of those things where I'm like, we are always going to be helpers. We are always going to be fixers. We are always going to put everybody else before us because that's who we are as individuals and human beings. And when the world gives us this gift of being able to step away with grace and it doesn't allow us to come back in, I see that as a blessing. These things that happen, this idea of like, I felt like the filing cabinet like tipped over and everything fell out and I just shoved it all back in. Well, and it's still there. It is still in there. It is not filed in an organized fashion. It's just thrown into this messy filing cabinet. And so I think that there's a lot of opportunity for all of us, human beings in general, to be very clear on what do we need to do to start organizing that filing cabinet. And I know that the way that our brains operate when we are experiencing any kind of depression or frustration, like that is the time when we feel the most alone. And it's really, really challenging to ask for the things that we need when we need it the most. And also, whoever this person is, I'm in awe of the courage and the commitment to their family that will be there forever if they're lucky enough. And while the people that we work with they are our family, they're our ride or die, right? They're the only ones that get how ugly and real it can get. But when they are at sensory overload and just doing the best they can, I mean, we're all just kind of trauma bonding at that point. We don't have the ability to tap into that emotion because we got to protect ourselves at all costs. And I'm sorry that it's like that for all of you, that you walk into this place and selflessly give to a deficit and then, have to go home and just wait it out to the next day, to the next shift, and feel like you're doing this all alone. And I'm looking at 1,012 people that all know exactly how that feels. And what does that say? That says that y'all aren't alone, you know? And in those moments, I think that what I want to say is, like, remember that there was 1,012 people on Friday the 13th in a cold December day, all sharing in one message that we are all here for each other in some capacity, even if it's just through a couple words on a screen. So there was just so much to pick apart. I don't even know. Those were the kind of the things that stood out the most for me, is like just knowing how that, even me as a clinician holding on to everybody's stuff every day, as Cinnamon says, being the puke bucket. By the end of the day, when my kids come home, I'm like, I have no more to give. My senses are overloaded and my brain might explode. And that's just part of being a human being and having to be on constantly, so what a gift to be able to be with the real family, that we all dream about, I think, at some point in our life. And then we get it and we're like, I don't know what to do with this thing,
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay.
It's definitely a lot. Like I was saying, yeah, it's a lot to unpack. And when I was reading it too, I thought, holy hell, like there's a lot here. There was a lot that that I could relate to as well. I've known this person for a long time, and this person had reached out and was like, I've been kind of struggling with some things, and so they had been telling me, and like they said, it was what, over a year ago or so when they left, or a few years ago, whichever. And I knew this person was going through that stuff. We'd been in contact every so often, and they were working on all this. And when I reached out last week, to ask how things have been going, and told this person about this discussion, what was going on, I asked, as long as they were comfortable enough to answer a couple of questions, and they were all about it, and they they were like, writing that stuff. What I didn't put on here was that at the very top of the message, when this person responded, it was, I had to stop myself because there was so much that they wanted to write about what they had gone through and have been going through, and how things have gotten better. And so I told them, I said, I just thank you very much for just having the courage to and being willing to share some of this information. I appreciate it because I know it will help others who might be feeling this way. And Roxy, over to you. What are your thoughts from what you heard on this?
Well, I'll say what I said in the comments. My first thought to that was, yep, that's exactly what it is. And I've heard that story in some form or another thousands of times. Yep, that's exactly what it is. And I will say one thing that really stuck out to me is I do think that it's very astute of that person to see that I don't believe truly, innately, that all dispatchers are cold and heartless and have no feelings and
Right,
and
of
don't
course.
want to reach out to this person. I don't believe that. I think that in theory everybody comes with good intentions, right? But I think it's very astute that she saw, and I'm just assuming it's a she, that they're at a negative in peopling and social skills and human connection. Like, they're at a vast negative. And even in my position today, I have to really think about not snapping at my husband. I have to really think about sometimes responding to text messages like a normal person would. Most of my friends on this call will probably tell you I'm not a very good responder sometimes. So I do love that she saw that's not an intentional thing she didn't think, and I don't think it is either. It's just that sometimes we are absolutely at the end, and there's just I have nothing left to give somebody. And I would love to be able to say, yeah, that's great. I'm so glad that happened to you. Or, hey, how are you doing? I just want to check in. But that's not the first thing on my mind. And so I know that that's not good and that's not what it should be, but I definitely relate to that. And, I did spend a little bit of time where I took a pause from 911 after an officer involved shooting. And I relate so much to trying to reintegrate yourself back into your family. And you never see how high strung you are until you've had a chance to like actually be a wife or actually be a mom or actually go and do things and have dinner at 5 o'clock where you can eat it while it's still warm. That was amazing to me. And so I really relate to that and relate to her having these thoughts in her new position, because when I went off to work in civilian life, I did too. I was like, why is this such a big deal? There are people that are like having medical like, why are you freaking out? And I would think about all these calls that I had dealt with, and I couldn't really relate to normal civilian work life. So I really get that, and I really appreciate how deep she went into her feelings, because all of that, yes, absolutely, all of that.
Yeah, I think I end up reflecting on years ago when I spoke to my wife and I was like, what was it like for you while I was in dispatch? Because we don't always know, right, how we are in any capacity of certain things that are going on. And basically I was kind of a dick because I was dealing with so much stuff, and it was like I kind of wish you would have kind of figured out your therapeutic side when you started sharing your stories a little bit sooner. And I was like, I apologize. I apologize for that. I will take that. I will own it. And then, years later when I'm out of dispatch and my son and during an episode that I was recording, um he ends up saying, I ask him, what was it like for you? And he says, it's hard to miss something that you didn't have. I was like, fuck. I was like, all right. And that's in the episode. I kept it in there. I kept it in on purpose because I wanted other people to be able to hear that and know. Now, later on, he did he did some research on me and the stuff that I've done for 911 and everything. And he ended up telling me later on, he's like, I'm sorry for saying that. And I said, no, don't be sorry. Those were your true feelings. I'm glad that you said that. And he goes, but I didn't know. He goes, I didn't know at the time that you weren't just gone. You were helping other people, and you're still helping other people. And so he understood, but I kind of wish, like I always ask people, if you could go back in time to talk to yourself in the beginning of your career, whichever, what is some advice you would give yourself? Not to change anything, but what would you tell yourself? And some of those things I would go back and tell myself, start like sharing sooner, start looking more into yourself because the stuff is going to come back. And if you don't start working on it now, um, you're it's not going to be good for you, and you're going to be struggling, and you might not know who to reach out to. So that's one of the things for myself specifically. But over to you, Cinnamon, for everything that I just read and some of the stuff that we've been saying as well. What are some of the things that stuck out? Again, there's a lot there, but what are some of the things that stuck out for you? As I know I see you over there taking notes and everything too.
Well, I have zero short-term memory. So if I don't write it down, then I can't listen because I've got to keep it like right here.
Yeah.
So I'm down to like 14 points. Luckily, I've been able to cross things off as you guys have talked. But I thought, the first question, I was like, when we retire, that's when we start to recollect, right? And we get hit hard with a lot of that. But listening to this is also where we get to relearn and reflect,
Mhm.
right? So before kind of answer the question, when I moved to Cincinnati in 2016. I used to live down the road from Aaron, and that's where we got to know each other, was in Central Ohio. And when I moved down here, I was by myself. I didn't have any friends here, and my life completely changed. And I was very hurt at first that I'm pointing up because on my computer, she's above me like a Brady Bunch sister. She didn't call me. And she didn't text me as much as I thought that she should. And I was very emotionally injured. And it took me a long time to realize, like, her life didn't change. My life changed. And she was already at capacity. And so my love for her love for me did not change simply because we weren't in the same city. But what it was going to look like was going to be different. And if my expectations stayed the same, I was always going to be hurt and I was always going to be disappointed. And so I think, I watch the same thing happen when I hear other first responders retire, when they go on injury. Like, nobody called me. And I'm like, okay, fair. Who did you call? Who did you reach out to? And when I'm listening to that email or the message, what popped into my head was shame, because there were two things very explicitly said. One was the hard reality of, like, that changeable past. I didn't realize I was that bad before. Like, she didn't say, I didn't realize how much my job affected me. She said, I didn't realize how bad I was before. That is not guilt. That is shame. Right? It is, I didn't do something wrong. I am something wrong. And that was a little heartbreaking to hear her say in that. And the second thing was because people didn't reach out after she left to ask her to help. The message was, I'm not worth it. And I felt that, I can feel how much easier it is to make yourself the deficit, because that can make it make sense. And so I'm always going to encourage people to also pick up the phone, because now, knowing that previously you didn't have the bandwidth, and now you have this new opportunity where you can do all these things. Like, recall of what it was like before when you didn't have that. And now you do, so you can be the one, right? Like, let me be the one to change how this is worked. The other thing that came up at the end of what Erin was saying, and I'm surprised she didn't say it, so I'll say it now. Our friend Kenny Mitchell has a saying that is, there are too many of us to ever feel alone. And when Erin was talking about the 1,012 people on here and all of us feeling alone at times, I thought of, like, Brene Brown says the most powerful two words in the English language are me too. So you sure as shit can believe that if 1,012 people are gathering on a Friday afternoon in a cold day in winter, then there's a lot of Me Too's that are echoing on the interwebs, and there are too many of us to feel alone. And the last thing I want to kind of tune into is, well, I guess two. When she said, I'm allowed to be human in this new job, what I heard was, why are we teaching people they can't be human in this job? And so it goes back to, we have got to start preparing for the end on day one. You have to prepare for the last day on the first day. And that goes into changing that culture, because Erin and I, like, she's asked me a few weeks ago, she's like, why wouldn't you just cry on that podcast? Because I was like sucking in my lip. And I'm like, wow, I guess I don't know. I don't know why I was not okay with that. And so since then, now I'm just a big crybaby. But it it's a lot better for me, right? And if I am seeing crying, then maybe that'll give permission to the next person, and then we aren't all stuffing this shit that we see and that we hear and that we imagine, and it doesn't have to get upchucked 3 months after our retirement date, because then we really are less likely to be connected. And so, there's so, like you guys said, there's so many moving pieces to what this individual wrote. But the things that just kind of got reiterated to me is, when we retire, we also, can relearn. And we're relearning because somehow we felt like we had to stop doing those things. And maybe, the worst thing that I see going on in the first responder world right now, beyond which I think a lot of our problems in the mental health field are secondary, is the shortages, the staffing shortages that are causing mandatory overtime, that is causing absolute exhaustion and burnout. So what do we do to create that change on day one? And where like, do we access funds somewhere to design these programs? Who's going to do it? Do we, I've watched people say we're fighting and we're not fighting to merge two agencies together, so we're not so short staffed. So we've got one person, taking calls in a tiny community, but on a bad night, it is really bad. I don't know what those solutions are, because I'm not one of you, right? I've not had the experience of being the responsible and taking the call. I've just got to sit by. And thanks. I'm reading Roxy's piece, but I don't know. I'm so touched by what she had to say. I related to it so much. I feel so much compassion and so much empathy for this woman. And it's the shame and the guilt and the frustration and the feeling flawed, and like you did something wrong, and then you're learning about it at a point where you can't go back and change it. It's just, this is kind of like the all-encompassing message, where there was not a corner of this box that was not touched. And so again, I think it goes back to, there's not something wrong with you because you did something wrong or you did it badly. It's hard because it's fucking hard. And we forget that. And we make it so much more difficult on ourselves, because we have so much grace for other people, but we don't give it to ourselves. And so I would encourage those people, like Erin did, when you think that you're feeling alone, remember there are too many of us to feel alone. There were 100 or 1,012 of you today that would, I guarantee, would pick up the phone if you called them. And so now we just have to figure out, what do we do to make it easier to pick up the damn phone?
Exactly. And agreed. Roxy, did you have something?
I do, because I think that I'm going to call out 911 here. I think we have the choice to do it differently. We have to make the choice to do it differently, right? We have these people who leave us, and we need to send them off with light and love, right? We want them to come back into our family. We need to make the choice and really be intentional about reaching out to these folks and telling them, hey, we would love to have you at our employee barbecue. Hey, we'd love for you to come and swing by the center sometime when you're not busy. We have to make the choice to do it differently. It's just like wellness. It's just like telling our stories. It's just like so many other things. We have had all of these traditions that are not always good ones ingrained in us so deeply that it's like me being a child of alcoholics. Like, I had to make the choice to stop drinking, right? Like, that's all I knew how to cope with things, because that's how I watched it. So we grew up in a 911 where we were only taught how to do things a certain way. We have to make the choice to do it differently. Like, I go back, Ricardo, to thinking about Nicole. If if we just would have made the choice to do it differently, maybe she would be here. You know, if we just would have figured out some way to bring her in, maybe that would have made all the difference. You know, it makes me so damn mad that we're stuck in this perpetual cycle of doing it how we've always done it. And it's failing. It's failing us. It is failing us so deeply. And I just always go back to her. Like, what if we would have figured out a way to bring her back to us, you know, and to show her that she still had value and worth, and that being 911 is still something she could do outside of 911. And I'm so angry at myself for not trying harder to find a way to make her see that. And so I think that we can find a way and make the choice to do it better. We know better now, so we got to do better. And I just, you know, it's so many levels. It's not just this topic. It's so many different things that we've got to be intentional about doing it better. So, yeah, I get a little worked up too, Cinnamon. So, it's a choice, and so many things are a choice, and that's what I go back to time and time again. Is it's a choice, and yeah, we were probably raised up a little wrong, but let's do better. You know.
Agreed.
I want to say something really quick to Roxy in particular. My heart hurts for where you are in your journey with grieving for Nicole. Aaron and I had a suicide that we just celebrated the 1-year anniversary of the loss of a very dear friend. And one of the hardest lessons that we had to learn was that we could have done everything perfectly, and it still was not our decision. And doing this work, especially on the clinical side, we get told over and over, you too can prevent suicide, like it's a goddamn forest fire. And what we had to, the hard, bitter truth of that is the only person that can prevent suicide is the person making the choice. And the only suicide I can prevent is my own. And man, if I could just make that untrue, I would be loving life a lot easier. And I want to offer you grace and to give it to yourself, and for anyone in the community that feels the way that Roxy is expressing that she feels, being angry at yourself that you didn't figure something out, that you didn't do something. You know, we've heard a lot lately about we should do more. And like, I think we get to do different, right? We get to make a variety of our approaches. But I don't doubt for a minute, Roxy, that you are working your tail off to make a difference in this community. I don't need you to do more, right? You don't need, what you are doing is plenty. And driving yourself into the ground trying to save everyone as a first responder trauma clinician who thought that's exactly what I was supposed to be doing, don't believe it. It is a thought that you are thinking that is a lie. And you can't do that to yourself. You just can't. And maybe we can take that conversation offline, but I did not want that moment to pass where I hear you saying, we've got to do more. If we did something different, I'm so mad at myself. But I just felt really compelled to say that to you. So,
Aaron, I saw you mentioning something, or it looked like you were saying something. Your microphone is muted, but
I was just saying that goes to everybody. That goes to everybody. What Cinnamon just said goes to everybody. That's it. See, I probably wasn't even supposed to say it because my mic was muted.
No, it was good. I just wanted to make sure you had a moment to jump in there as well. And I also want to say to everyone who is watching and listening right now, um, this is not to this is a discussion that is probably needed to been we've needed to have this for a while because this is about those who end up leaving that feel like they're not part of this anymore or feel like they're not part of the family of the Thin Gold Line or 911 or anything like that. And so I say this as well because I know that there have been other organizations or other people who are like, oh, you guys are doing all these different sessions where you're just telling people to leave. And we're like, no, we're not telling people to leave. We're trying to make things better for those who are in it now, those that are getting ready to leave, and those who are already gone. Because there are a lot of folks who are gone that I have spoken to that have said, I kind of wish I could, even maybe volunteer at a conference or maybe go and do this or that, but I feel like I'm not welcome or I'm not part of it anymore. I'm like, fuck, like, what are we doing? Like, like what we've been saying, and I don't mean just like we, like us. I mean like 911 as a whole, or some of these other places, these other organizations, rather. What is going on? And when I've talked to people, I was the last place that I spoke at was for the Atlantic APCO conference. It was in Maine, and part of the keynote that I was doing was that Imagine Listening session where dispatchers for those first 30 minutes get a chance to share some of the stories. They can share a save, right? But also some of the stories that they've kind of been holding in. And I've only done it one other time where it was part of like the actual keynote piece. We transitioned into it, and there were so many people that wanted to share their story. So many people. And it was just going on and going on. And I I had to apologize to some people because I had only brought so many challenge coins, but that was so many people who shared. Like, luckily, I had some pins to be able to give as backup. But also, when I told these folks, I said, "I'm sorry, I don't have some of these extra coins." They're like, "It's not about the coin. I just wanted to be able to share for myself and anyone else who might be dealing with something hard." Now, what I also want to share here, I've been holding on to this picture actually, and it just came to mind while I was listening to each one of you talk. Now, this picture and the person who's on this picture, and she doesn't know that I'm about to do this. I just pulled this from a message that I got. We were kind of talking about this a while ago, and this is not the person who wrote any of these messages. So I just want to make sure to put that out there right now. But it was just talking about those who, like, we talk about, like, especially with like the I am 911 movement, and this person said that they had a moment where they're like, I am still 911 and always will be. And she gave this to me to post, and I hadn't posted it yet because there's been so many things going on, and I want to show this now because I think this is perfect. So the about 6 months after I launched the movement, I had people, I called it Project I Am 911, where I wanted to humanize the voice within the trenches of 911 by just kinda showing their face and having 911 I Am 911 on their hand to just say, like, I'm basically the human, like, I'm the person who's there with you, and you stick with me, right? And people were sharing their stories to be able to get it out, and all of us, connecting, and we still do. But when we were talking about this, she goes, I just wanted to kind of share this or give this to you to share it out there to say that when those folks leave, it's not a one and done. There's still 911. So let me see if it pops up here. So there it is. So she has it on her hand, and she's got the still in there as well. That's my good friend Krista out of Michigan. She's awesome. So I just wanted to share that there and just to say, for anybody who is out that feels like you're not anymore, you always will be. and we need to continue to reach out to each other because we're what we have. And of course, those who seek help and all too, that is good as well. We need to continue this conversation going because obviously there are a lot of folks that are still hurting out there, and some of them don't know who to reach out to. I thought this picture was perfect to be able to show that you still are, you always will be, in a different capacity, right? But we're still here for each other, and we can do this. We just got to be able to do this. Uh, we can do this together through communication or whatever it may be. So I know it kind of came up a little bit already of I'm not sure how to do this, but just talking out loud and anybody in the comments or anything like that, how do you think there's a way to combat this when those are out? Or even as we were talking, Cinnamon, you mentioned it like on day one, already preparing for when you go because it gets into your blood quickly. It gets into your blood really fast, public safety and wanting to help and putting yourself into it completely. And then when you're getting ready to go and you're scared to go, even when you transition to a different dispatch center, it's scary to go to a different place because now you're also learning a whole different dynamic of working with people that you really don't know. But I don't know, a way to prepare exiting and then somehow still staying involved if you want to stay involved, right? But also feeling comfortable enough to be able to continue to reach out and say, hey, I'm kind of dealing with some things. You are a person that I worked with. How are you dealing with some of that stuff? And I know we kind of mentioned as well, like the person who wrote that second message, like there are folks out there that are so I guess destroyed, in a sense with overtime and everything that's going on that they might not have any more to be able to give, but just to listen. Like sometimes you don't even have to say anything, just to listen. So I guess what are your thoughts? What are some ways or just some thoughts on how to combat this?
I want to say something real quick. The first thing I
Sure.
thought, for whatever reason, was going back to that folks don't reach out to this person that wrote in or called in, and I thought, what if when you're on the other side and you are the retired one, you are the one sending like a random message throughout the day that just says, just reminding you you're not alone and people are thinking about you, or something. Like, what if that, even those small little gestures, one, when in doubt, focus out, right? When you are feeling down about yourself, one of the best things you can do is kind of put that energy out there, create a different energy with folks. And so I think even if while you're still active and working, getting into that habit of like on Sundays, it's my day off, whatever, obviously shift work, but you are focusing on, I'm going to spend 5 minutes and text 3 people and remind them that they're not alone. Remind them that people are thinking about them. Even those small little gestures while it's being worked on to start at the beginning, it's something that can be done immediately.
Mhm.
Sounds cheesy, but I've been on the receiving side of a love bomb or two in my life, and it usually comes exactly when I need it the most, you know?
Yeah. No, and it doesn't sound cheesy at all. I'm gonna scroll up here really quick. Over here in the comments, it goes along with what you were saying just now. This person says, "Thank you so much. This is exactly what I needed to hear as someone that left and then came back to the dispatch center, but no longer working the desk. I struggle a lot with my identity as a in quotes dispatcher when I'm not really dispatching anymore. Just hearing that I'm still welcome in the community is huge." You hit it right there. What about you, Roxy?
What was the question?
Combating this, just what we've been talking about, how, that I guess just kind of like the preparation when people leave that, feeling scared, but more so when they're out of it and they feel like they're not a part anymore, kind of like Aaron saying, um, just sending a message to someone, s- still thinking of you, like just just so that they don't feel like they're just completely cut off where no one talks to you anymore, and then that's it. And you're like, fuck. I we've been through a lot of shit. You and I worked the craziest incidents where we're listening and hoping that our officers make it back, or we're helping each other with CPR. And we worked and did all these things that no one else will ever know. They'll never know what that's like because they were not the ones. But then you leave and it's like, damn, we went through that deep, deep stuff and now I'm nothing. How do we combat that I guess that loneliness, or helping people still feel like they are still part of that thin gold line?
So I'm going to speak a little bit to Lisa's question in the Q&A, because I think this is really important. I think as associations, there's space for us to invite those people like Lisa that have 34 years of expert knowledge to be a part of our committees, to be a part of our mentorship groups, to still play a role in shaping what 911 can be, even on the other side. And so I think I'm gonna speak a little bit higher. Nationally, we have some space. We could do more here. And Cinnamon, I'm sorry, I'm a dispatcher, so I'm always thinking about how we do more. But I think there's space where we could invite these people who have this wealth of knowledge that is going out the door to help more than just their department. And I think that starts with us making them understand that we still need you. We still need you, and we still need your expertise. And what I hope to work towards at some point is to create some kind of group full of retirees or people who have medically separated, or whatever the situation is, where they can come together and troubleshoot ways that they could still make a contribution to 911. Because just like those folks who are now speaking and on the conference circuit, they're not in the center anymore, but they're still making a contribution to 911. So why not you, Lisa? Like, why not you? Right? And so maybe that's not speaking, maybe that's not training, but you could still play a hand in committee work. You could still come to conferences, and I think as associations, we could find more ways to give those folks with all of this knowledge a pathway to come and join us for conference. I want to tell everybody that they're welcome. And that means people who are still in, and people who are 911 out on the streets. Everybody's still welcome. And I think there are pathways where we could get better there and really take the knowledge that people like Lisa have and put it to good use for everybody.
Thank you for that. Cinnamon, you were writing some stuff down, so I'll come back to you.
Yeah, I wrote everyone's in, baby. That's literally what I wrote. Yeah, the idea that there's an in and an out. And Roxy, I get what you're saying when like I'm always thinking about more. And when I say like I got 24 hours in a day, and right now about 21 of them are committed to first responder mental health. I'm not capable of doing more. I am capable of getting more people involved and continuing to be creative and come up with new, different ideas of how to engage. But for me to take those last 3 hours, I can't do it. Right. And I think that's where we get tricky in this field, because we are helpers. And so that idea of everyone's in, baby, whether you are retired, or you're on your, first year, because if you're looking at a 25-year career, like it's going to be real hard to keep a hold of that manual from day one. But I did see someone say in the comments, I should have been actively moving it back down, but it was, I wish I would have had this 25 years ago. And man, if I've heard that once and had a nickel for it, I certainly wouldn't be sitting where I'm sitting right now. But I think I think part of changing this is moving out of this exclusionary mindset where there are people out that we have to invite in. Because if and we watch it across the whole first responder community, it's like, if I'm not X, then I'm on the outside. And I know for me, it doesn't matter what day I retire, I am always going to be a social worker. It is in my blood. I didn't join a career. There was a job that was designed for someone with my imprint, right? So that's never going to go, even when the paychecks stop. So I'm not going to be on the outside of that. And maybe if it's starting to break down that myth of, there are those of us that are legit because we're still collecting that paycheck, versus, like, of course, like, I appreciate that I'm still 911, but where did that mentality come that you weren't 911 because you weren't doing the job anymore? Like, you don't undo all of those years of exposure, because now I loved that now you're in the 14th of the month club. Whoever mentioned that in their comments, because they get their retirement checks on the 14th. You know, again, I think it always goes back to initiatives versus culture change, right? If we're identifying a problem, our solution can be both the how we address it, but also, like, how do we speak into shifting the culture so we don't have to make people feel included, because we never made them feel excluded, right? That we were breaking that idea from day one that when you retire, you're useless to us. Like, shit, I don't care if somebody's got a year in on a paycheck. If you've done this for 25 years and now you're only getting your check on the 14th of the month and it's a partial percentage, you still have more wisdom to offer. We are not done with you. We need you at the table more than we need a lot of other folks, at that table. So, maybe it's about messaging. I certainly don't have all the answers, but I will be happy to discuss them and brainstorm and come up with them so that we can at least leave 3 hours for Roxy to get some sleep. So
Well,
that's just what I want to say, because I want to make sure no one heard my messaging to Roxy in a negative way of, like, stand down, Roxy. Like, no, girl, I just want you to be able to get some sleep. That's all.
This has been, I told people, I said, this last panel discussion is going to be deep, and there's a lot to unpack, and we could probably talk for even more hours, but we have, we've got a lot of information that we gave. We've got tons of folks in the comments who have given their opinions, how they felt. And thank you, all of you in the comments, in the chat, being all of you here and sharing your feelings, the courage to share your feelings. Like I said, if you didn't feel comfortable, you didn't have to, but a lot of you did, and I thank you for that. And even if you didn't, that's okay, because you're here in support of each other, and that's what this is all about. That's why we wanted to have this discussion. It's why I wanted to have Aaron and Cinnamon on as well, because of their expertise and what they do with After the Tones Drop podcast, and the folks that they've spoken to. Someone had mentioned, it's pretty high up where I was scrolling, but someone had mentioned, if this session had been in person versus virtual, it would have to be a week long because of the amount of hugs that everybody would be giving each other. And I love that. That's the understanding that we all have. It's hard to do, but it's just like the Imagine Listening session. It's hard to explain what it feels like to be in a room with a bunch of people who know exactly what it's like that you're going through, and to hear people share their stories, and some folks just break, but then have other folks that they might not even know come up and give them a hug and say, hey, we're here for you, it's okay. And it just continues going, and that's the kind of cycle that needs to continue to happen. But it's because of conversations like this, the work that Roxy does, the work that Aaron and Cinnamon and so many other folks are doing that are gonna make things better going on. Everything that I've done, and I know a lot of people have said the same thing about themselves. We want to leave 911 in a better place than what we found it. Because this isn't for us. Well, it is therapeutic for me still to continue to share my stories or to help others share their stories, right? But this is more to help those people that are still in it, the people who have, retired out, who are struggling, but also to prepare that literal next generation of 911, those first responders that are coming in so that they have it better than the way it was when we started. That's what this is all about. Man, we're gonna have to hug it out right here virtually. Like, yeah, drop that mic. Oh man, this has been a great one. I want to look in the questions over here really quick. It says, at Lisa, if you still want to get involved, please contact me. I'd love to get you hooked into a committee with Nina. So that was Roxy there.
I'll put her to work.
Yeah. Excellent. That is excellent. So we've got all this other information that's in here as well, and this has just been really good. Um, oh, I don't know what happened. Roxy's kicked her out. She was having issues with it before, where it was kicking her out, and she's like, "I don't know what's going on. My computer's possessed." I was like, "Dude, you must have a ghost in there or something." And I don't know if she put something back in here. I'll bring her back in. But either way, we are going into the wrap up of this. And Aaron and Cinnamon, thank you so very much, as well as Roxy, for being here, for just everything that you guys do, but especially for all of you who are out there who are watching and have been watching and listening to this. You are not alone. You're not alone. Like you were saying, there's too many of us to feel as though we're alone. You are still 911. And we are going to continue working on all of this, and it is going to get better. I know it will. As long as we can continue these important conversations and the work that is going on, there's Roxy. Things will continue to get better. Just reach out. And if you haven't heard from someone in a while, reach out as well. Please. So we're going into the wrap up now of the final Dare to Be Great. And I don't know, there's a lot of people that were in the comments alone who were saying stuff that I thought, oh man, I need to rethink this. But I will just say the end of this week, which has been an amazing week, and I thank you all for the support. I didn't get a lot of sleep, but I will say that it was completely worth it. And just to be able to have the amount of folks sharing all of this different information, powerful stories, people from all over the world coming to join us for Dare to Be Great. The reason it's called Dare to Be Great is because this whole thing was born out of the pandemic, when we all had our own Dare to Be Great moment. And now you can continue with all of this information that you've got this entire week and every single event, so that you too can dare to be great. Thank you for the support throughout all the years. I appreciate you, and we will see you all in the next one. Thank you for everything.